Hi, it's Layle Koncar. I want to share with you guys one of the really neat exclusive products from Scrapbook.com, and these are the water brushes. So the water brushes come in two different types, the rounded tip that we'll be using today, as well as the flat tip. With the rounded brushes on the round tip, there are 3 to a package, and there are 3 different tip sizes. So you have a small, a medium, and a large. Now our barrel is 6 inches long, so we have lots of room to kind of hold on to that and get a really good application of our watercolor. I want to talk a little bit about how to actually open them to fill them with water. Unscrew them, and then I usually take the little reservoir and I go into the bathroom or the kitchen and I fill it with the faucet. So I'm just kind of letting the water drip in there. That seems to be the easiest way to do that. And then when I am putting the lid back on, then I am then going to turn that clockwise. All right, so let's take a look at 5 different techniques, things that we can do with these fun little guys. And the first thing that we're going to do is create a splatter technique. So with all the techniques that we are doing, I have just cut smaller pieces of watercolor paper. And when you're working with the water brushes, I recommend that you use watercolor paper. It makes sure that it will kind of soak in the wetness of the water. I've also made these small. The reason I've done that is so I can play. And I think that's one of the things that's so important when we're working with a tool like this, that we give ourselves permission to play. When you're playing, you're not making any mistakes because you're just playing. All right, so let's grab one of our little squares and I will just pop the lid off of that little guy. And I'm going to get a little bit of water in that. And let's take the blue. Our first technique for the splatter, super simple. I am just going to hold that over the paper and then I'm just going to flick that. And I am kind of randomly depositing splatters on my surface. Easy peasy. If I wanted to, I could get a different color and bring in a different color and start mixing colors. Now, if you do that, I do recommend that you let that first layer dry before you bring in another splatter, or else your splatters might look kind of muddy. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe you want muddy splatters. So our first technique is the splatter. The next technique that we're going to look at, we're actually going to blow the ink using a regular old household straw. So we'll do that blue again, add a little bit more ink, and I'm just going to drop. So I'm squeezing that reservoir, and now I can control the distribution of how much ink and water I want. All right, so I just squeezed the reservoir, and now I'm going to take my regular household straw, and I'm just going to blow through that straw. So I've started to deposit the ink towards the top of the paper, and if I want to change direction, then I can just rotate and keep blowing. So I just get a really very, very random, but kind of a fun little technique there, just using a straw. The nice thing is with that straw, it's plastic. So generally I wouldn't throw this away. I might as well just have that my ink blowing straw. That's technique 2. Okay, technique 3. We're going to take a clear toner sheet. Now I have cut this down. They come in 8.5 by 11 sheets. So I've just cut it down a little bit. And this is something that I don't throw away. So if you kind of could see, I have dried ink on here, which is great because I don't need to throw that away. But I'm going to apply my ink to the toner sheet, and then I will transfer it over to my paper. And I'm going to do that with 2 different mediums. I'll do that first with the watercolor, and then we'll use a brush marker. All right, so with our watercolor, let's go back to our blue here. I am just kind of painting on that clear toner sheet. And I'm going to just flip that right over. Use my fingertip to distribute that ink on the paper. And I can even lift that up. I still have a little bit of ink on there, and I can move it around. As you can see, I am using a nonstick craft mat, and I definitely recommend when you're working with the water brushes and watercolors and distress inks and your oxides and crowns and all those fun mediums, that you use a nonstick craft mat, because that will help to make sure your surface not only stays clean but easily wipeable. We'll also do it with a marker. I'll take my brush marker and I'm just going to color that sheet, I will drip in a little bit of water. So I don't even have a color on my brush here. I'm just dipping in a little bit of water. We'll come back here and just kind of brush that in a little bit. Get out another one of my little watercolor papers and apply that like so. So I have a pretty dark distribution of that ink there. And if I wanted to have that be a little bit lighter, again, all I have to do is add a little bit more water. And if I put that in a different spot, you can see how the distribution of that ink is quite a bit lighter. So some really interesting different ways to make some creative backgrounds. All right, speaking of creative and another household item, the next technique we are going to use to get kind of a really distressed effect. And we're using regular old table salt. So I have a pink example here and the green example. The green example, you can really see it almost looks like topography of maybe you're in an airplane and you see the ground below, but it's very neat and super easy to use. All we're going to do is take another one of our pre-cut sheets, and I am going to use my water brush to distribute that color. I'm actually now going to squeeze it. When I squeeze it, I'm adding a little bit more water there to that surface. And I want to make sure that I have a good amount of water on here for that salt to react with. I'll take a little bit of salt and just sprinkle that right on top. And now if I didn't want this to kind of be uniform across my entire surface, I could just sprinkle in a couple of different spots. And I would then set that aside to dry. Once it's dry, I'm going to get a reaction like that. Very fun. What you want to make sure to do, though, is when it is dry, you want to make sure to come in and wipe off that salt. Obviously, you don't want salt on your beautifully watercolor project. Our next technique, we are going to use some distressed crayons to make an ombre effect. So I'm going to take 3 crayons that are kind of in the same color family there. And I will take the lightest one. My lightest one is going to go in the center. And I want to start the center light because as I am applying the water, I want to make sure that I'm not kind of muddying it up. So if I start in the middle, I can do the middle and then move top to bottom. So we'll then take this color. And I'm very lightly, as you can see a little bit of that watercolor paper through. I don't want to get too much crayon. All right, now I'm going to take my water brush, starting with the middle. And I just start painting that. See how that crayon just starts to dissipate, make a really pretty, soft color. We'll kind of clean that off a little bit and then come to the top. And as I'm working my way down, we kind of get that blend. And I can keep kind of playing with that line to get a really nice blend there. Then we'll come down to the bottom and work our way up a little bit. So really neat ombre effect. Now the other thing that I can do, I have pretty definite lines there in between those colors. So if I wanted, I could actually then take that and do a transfer. So I'm just going to turn that upside down. Oh, you can see where I've played with that on my other side. I am applying nice steady pressure with my fingertips. And when I remove that, I have that beautiful ombre look. So definitely a little bit more blended than this look, but 2 different looks. You can do that with your distressed crayons, your distressed inks, with your watercolors, lots of different mediums to kind of play. And again, that's play, you guys. My little pieces I'm playing, and what I make is art. There's no right or wrong. If I mess up, it's not a mess up. It's a happy accident that turned out fun. All right, our very last technique I want to show you is a masking technique, and we are going to use the Nuvo masking fluid. You guys, this is a really fun one. I want to make sure with my masking fluid to definitely shake it up. I really want to make sure I get all of that fluid in there distributed. I also recommend that you do this in a well-ventilated area. It's very strong, has a very strong smell to it. So I will apply a little bit of that masking fluid right there on my craft mat. So I am going to use a pencil eraser. If we look at my example here, I have some pretty nice, even rounded circles. And if you were painting, if you're trying to get a circle, it's kind of hard to do. But if I use a regular old pencil eraser, and I'm just going to dab it into that masking fluid and make some random dots on my paper. If I want different size circles, I could take a sewing pin. I like to use a sewing pin that has the little round ball at the top. I can even stick that sewing pin in the top of my eraser so that I still have kind of a handle to work with. So I have my nicely random little dots there. Once that dries, and I want to make sure to completely let that dry, I would have something that looked like this. Now this is latex, so it looks like it is still wet. It is not wet. Once it's completely dry, I want to take my water brush and I am just going to paint right over the top of that. Now you can see I needed a little bit more ink. I didn't even have to come back and dip in the ink. I'm using the ink that's there and I'm just squeezing that reservoir, which you guys, again, is so handy. You'll notice I don't have a water cup here. I'm not dipping and dragging water and paint across my work surface. All right, so I kind of get that evenly distributed. I want to let that completely dry. So here is another sample that is completely dry. I want to take my fingertip and I want to gently roll that latex, that mask, off of the paper. And as I'm rolling towards the center of that circle. And that is really important. I want to roll towards the center of the circle because that will help ensure that I'm not actually tearing the paper outside of the circle. So I would just complete that step for all of those little circles. And we get a really great mask. All right, so those are the water brushes, the exclusive product from Scrapbook.com. And keep in mind, you guys, I've used the round tip set here that gives you a little bit more of a finer application, finer detail, but you also have the flat brush set. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more from Scrapbook.com, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a message. Happiness is life handmade.